Live. What's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to our monthly Tech Talk. This is our 19th Tech Talk, and this month we're joined by Marin Todorov, who's going to be giving a talk on iOS animations with Swift. Animations are really critical in your iOS apps. Not only are they important because they draw the user's attention towards something that's changing in your apps, but they're also important because they make your app a lot of fun and give your app some polish. And this is especially important these days in the era of flat design because apps look more similar these days, so animation can really make your app stand out from others out there. Today, Marin is going to join us and give us an overview of creating animations in Swift. He's also going to show you how to create some modern, neat-looking animations with some cool visual effects, and he'll also get into how you can animate when you're using auto layout. Marin Todorov is a developer who, in the old days, he used to be a web developer with over 10 years of experience. Then he was looking for something cool and shiny to move into, so he got into apps and started making his own indie apps, and some of them started to become popular, and he's been cutting his own paychecks ever since. Marin is also the developer of JSON Model, which is a popular open source library. He's one of the founding members of the tutorial team on raywendelick.com, and he has been a co-author of iOS 5, 6, 7, and iOS Games by tutorials. And he developed a huge, epic video tutorial series on iOS animations, and he even wrote his own book on iOS animations, which just came out this week, iOS Animations by Tutorials. Aside from being very busy with all of that, Marin also loves to travel. He's been to a number of countries and speaks a number of languages. He particularly likes to sample local food in different countries. He's a big foodie. And most recently, and as one of his most recent trips, he took a walking tour from Portugal to Santiago in Spain. So with that, I'm very happy to turn things over to Marin Todorov for his talk on iOS animations and Swift.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be on the Hangout. Thank you, Ray, for introducing me. Hello, everybody who's on the Hangout, and hello, everybody that's watching live. For this Hangout, I prepared a little presentation, and I'm going to be doing a few code demos live on the Hangout. Hopefully, everything works out good. And we're going to start with really simple stuff. I really want to show very, very simple stuff, like very basic view animations for starters, just so that people who are also familiar with animations in Objective-C would see how the Swift syntax looks like. So there's few showcases just to make sure that everybody's on board with the Swift syntax. And I'm going to dig into a few things that are a little bit different in Swift, and by different I mean better. So I hope that you're going to be happy with those. And then after views, we're going to do a couple of layer animations just to make sure that there's no surprises in there. There are still a couple of different things in Swift compared to Objective-C. And then we're going to jump into 3 quick demos which show you, kind of like intermediate level animations. We're going to have a look at some auto layout and some visual effects, so it's going to be cool. With this, I'm going to switch to a Keynote and present the slides that I've put quickly together for you. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. There you go. Okay, and switch to Keynote. Can one of you guys on the Hangout just give me a sign if you see the full screen presentation?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So let's start with iOS animations. We're going to start with, as said, beginner animations. So what are animations on iOS? Well, what you usually would use for animating your user interface will be animations on your views, right? So those are provided in UIKit, and they're very easy to use. UIKit provides you with a very nifty API that allows you to create really full-fledged animations with just one line of code. And if you have been working on your iPhone applications, on any iPhone application so far, chances are you've already created at least a few of those. So Usually you have a view, you have a property that you want to animate, for example, the alpha or the frame or the center, or another property that is allowed to be animated. And you say, I want to animate from this value to this value over this amount of time. That's all you need to do, right? So it's pretty easy. They're all one-liners. So let's have a look at how to create a few of those with Swift, so that you can have a look at the new syntax. And so if we have a look at the simplest of the APIs, you probably, hopefully already know, their APIs are static class methods on the UI view class, and they all start with animate with, or actually with animate, because there's a one extra API about keyframes that doesn't start with animate with. So they all start with animate, and they take a few parameters just to configure the animation. And as soon as you execute this one line, then the animation will kick off, and then they happen on screen. So this is the Swift syntax that is now currently on a screen. And if you've used the Objective-C syntax, you will see that this is really, really, really similar. Actually, if we put them one next to each other, just side by side, you will see that it is exactly the same. It's just there's a couple of square brackets less, and one of these there's less, just basically a little bit less to write about, and that's it. So as long as you have created any Objective-C animations with UIKit, you will be good to go with Swift as well. Let me quickly create a simple animation with Swift. I'm going to just open my starter project here in Xcode, and I'm going to switch to my terminal. I'm going to clean my derived data, just to make sure there are no source code crashes during the demo. We're going to put a link to this command if any of you wants to have a quick nifty command like me to clean their derived data as well. So I have a starter project, and all it does is to just give the simulator a second here. Okay, so all it does is just to show this ball image on screen, and it's a UI image view, and we want to animate this in Swift. So how are we gonna do it? I'm gonna call the UI view animate. Okay, and this gives me all the APIs that I can use. Choose the first one, which is the simplest one, just to try the Swift syntax. I'm going to put a 2-second duration for the animation, and then in this block here, I'm going to provide all the changes that I want to happen to the view. I want to probably make the ball fully transparent, so I'm going to use my outlet, the ball outlet, and I'm going to say that I want the alpha to be 0 alpha. So since the image is by default fully visible, then this will animate all the way from alpha 1 to alpha 0, and that's the simplest UIKit API to do animations. And as you can see, it's exactly the same syntax as Objective-C. Just to make sure that all this works, I'm going to run the app, and as we see, as soon as view to appear kicks in, this nifty API just fades out the ball. Pretty easy, pretty cool. As long as you type in UI view animate with, this is for the guys out there watching that are not really experienced with any of these. As long as you type in UIV.animate with, you will see the four possible options. And since I have everything so big on the screen, like the text is huge, you can't really see all the parameters. But like each of these takes a few more parameters, so you can create more complicated animations. I'm going to try one of these now. Let me delete this one. Let's have a look at the the next the next API. I'm sorry, which takes some options, and this allows us to configure a little bit of the animation happening on screen. I'm going to provide a 1.5 of duration, nifty parameter here to provide a delay for the animation so it doesn't kick in immediately. Options, I'm going to put in a curve ease out. This means that the animation is going to slow down towards the end. Here's going to be my block for animations, and here's going to be my completion block. Actually, no completion, just animations. So what I want to show you here is let's put the same animation code here, self ball alpha equals 0, and if I run it now, it's going to do exactly the same thing. It's going to fade out the ball like that. But what I want to show you is, okay, this may be more real estate to see. Okay, so what I want to show you is this options parameter here quickly. For the ones that don't know what is it, they can see how it works. For the ones that know what is it, they can see how to use the Swift options in here. So options takes a bit mask value, and you do the bit mask out of these values here defined in the UI view animation options enumeration. So actually this is a struct in Swift, and there's just the struct has this constants defined in it. What it used to be an enumeration in Objective-C is now this in Swift. But how it works is exactly in the same way. You before in Objective-C you had constants defined as UI view animation options begin from current state as one word. And what you have now is UI view animation option structure dot begin from current state. And since you in Swift you can omit actually the name of the structure, then you can just say, as I did just now, you can just say here, there it is, dot curve ease out. So in the end you have far less text on in your code. This is not really so obvious right now. Just let me add this just to mimic how it used to look in Objective-C. So when you have one of these options, this is not really crucial. But you have 3, then you need to start going on the next line, and so forth and so forth. Let me just show you quickly. Yes, so there will be auto reverse, for example, and then you will have the same thing with repeat. So as you can see, these pile up pretty fast and make code clunky and so forth. And in Swift you don't really need to use the name of the structure at all. So you can just go like this. Then you can put them in one line, and everything is really, it just reads better. I have to say that I really love it how it looks in Swift. So what this will do is that we say that this animation should repeat forever, and it should also not go only from the start to the end, but also from the end to the start. So it should basically repeat, but also go from the beginning to the end, and then back to the beginning, then back to the end, and so forth. So how does this look like? I'm going to run it quickly. So it looks like this. The ball would just keep fade out and fade in, and fade out and fade in forever. And this is one of the things that I really like about Swift, that by cutting out this part of these constant names that used to be there all the time for all of the values that you use, just makes the text so much more readable. It's good. I like it. So yeah, this was one of the things that I had in my slides to note about that. These are easier to use. Next thing that I really like in the that is better in Swift is that you can animate only a certain component of a structure. For example, if you want to resize your view, you can just animate the width of the size of the frame of your view. Or as in this example that is right now on screen, you can animate only the X component of the origin of the frame of your view. So pretty nifty, because let me show you how this looks in code. So right now the ball just animates. I'm going to make this a little bit quicker. So how does this look like? For example, if I want to just move the ball horizontally and not at all on the y-axis, I can just say self ball frame origin x plus 100, like this. So let's see how this looks like. Easy. You just say that you want to animate the x component of the region, and that's all you get. This is because in Swift you can modify the component, basically each of the components of a struct independently. So you don't really have to use to create a new CG point that has the same y but this new x and so forth. So you can just go straight ahead to region x or size width or whatever you want, or ball center x and so forth. So this is pretty handy. I really like it how it works in Swift. It's one of my favorite changes. But don't let me get carried away. We have a lot of things to look at. So next, most of you know that actually all the animation work or most of the animation work on iOS is done by Core Animation. So this is the animation engine that does everything for you. This makes it possible for your fluid animations to be always so fantastically fluid on screen. And people, we just spoke on the podcast a couple of days ago, like, what is core animation? Well, core animation is, it's just everywhere. If you're using the iOS SDK, it's just everywhere around you. It's like the air you breathe, because it's just spread throughout the system. And I made the comparison, is like the midichlorians in Star Wars. It's everywhere, and just you grab it and and then you feel the force and so forth. But joke aside, well, core animation is just the engine that the UI, the nice UI kit APIs are making use of to actually put everything together. So on the screen you will see the alternative or the parallel of our fade animation that we just saw for the ball written for core animation. So I'm gonna just quickly write this in code and see how it works, and I'm gonna explain as I go. So let's recreate the fade animation we have for the ball. So with core animation, you are one level deeper and you're one level more powerful, but of course there is one level more coding to do. So what do you usually do in core animation is that you need to create an animation model. So basically a model object that describes the animation, that has all the data that the animation needs to be rendered. So you need a instance of CA Basic Animation to create the fade animation that we have in mind. And CA Basic Animation, if you use this init method, it's really easy, because you can say, I want to animate this property directly. So the alpha property on the view, if you want to animate the same thing on a layer, you need to use the opacity property. It's exactly the same thing, they just chose another word for it. So this creates an animation model, and this animation is going to be animating the opacity property. Of which layer? Well, that's the thing. It's a model. You don't need to bind it to a certain layer or viewer. So before you need to, it's just a model that describes a possible animation that you will decide to run or not to run or whatever. So you say that you're going to be animating the opacity. You say that you want to animate it from a given value, for example 1.0, because that's what you start with, and you want to animate it to 0.0, so make it fully transparent. And the last thing you need to provide, the last bit of information you need to provide, is the duration of this animation. I'm going to use 1 second for this, and there it is. A fully configured animation that you could possibly choose to run on a given layer. It's going to animate the opacity from 1 to 0, and It's going to do that over the amount of 1 second of time. And how do you add it? Well, as you probably know, each view, like my ball here, like my beach ball on the screen, has a backing layer, so it's basically rendered via a CA layer. So this is really nice because then on each layer you can call a method called add animation and just supply your model here. You can give it a name so you can access it later. I'm not going to do this. So this is all it takes. Add animation and then provide your model. And then this will already animate the layer of the ball. As you can see, as soon as I start the simulator, the ball goes transparent, and then it reappears. Now, this is the little bit annoying thing when you work with core animation. You're going one level deeper, so you have to take care of certain things yourselves. So, since the animation animates from this value to this value, regardless of what the actual opacity of the ball is, when the animation is finished, then the ball reappears as basically it is configured via its own data model. So there's a separation in between what you see on screen and what actually is in data in your app. I'm not going to go into details because I can speak about this a long time. The only thing that I will say, because hopefully many of you already know how that works, is that you need to set the property that you animate, in this case the opacity property, to the final value of your animation. So sorry, that will be the 0, 0. And so as soon as the animation is over, core animation will basically show the original layer that was visible on screen before the animation started. And since you update it to the last frame of the animation, it will look like when the animation is over, it will look like the layer remains in this state. As said, don't have the time to explain all of it right now. I just wanted to show you the Swift syntax for all of this, because for the ones of you that did Objective-C, for sure you can see that there's no more boxing in here anymore. You used to box those values because, sorry, put it on screen. So in here you can see some good old Objective-C, and you can see that from value and to value need to be boxed because those expect to be objects, and in Objective-C those were just floats, and you couldn't really assign them to from value to value. You had to use NSValue, boxing, and so forth. Well, luckily in Swift, you don't really need to do this anymore. It's not really such a big a burden, because in modern Objective-C you can just put the @ sign in front, and that boxes the value automatically. But it's still much nicer and more coherent, of course, to just use numbers, and that's all. In regard to this, just have a look at the next slide. Boxing of structs still remains. So numbers are now objects in Swift, but structs are still structs. They're not objects. So if you want to use for the from value or to value any CGRect, CGPoint, CA transform 3D, and so forth, you need to use NSValue. Still, it looks pretty easy in Swift. There's just an init method that takes any of the types that you can box with NSValue, so it's pretty easy to do that in code. Okay, let me have a look at what do we do next. Oh yeah, so animating layers gets pretty easy with Swift because you don't really need to box values at all. For example, if you want to do something that I cannot do with views, for example, animate the corner radius of my layer. You know how to make cornered views, right? Like views with rounded corners. I'm sorry. So you just set the corner to a value, and that's this is 0, 0 because views have have square corners by default. And so if I want to do an animation on this, I would say I want to animate from 0.0 to, let's say, 20 points over a 2 seconds period. And then I'm going to also update this. Okay. So now when I run this animation, see that nothing really happens. Sorry for this, guys. Is it a corner radius from valid to valid duration? Corner radius. Yes, of course. So to round the corners of this view, we need to tell the layer that we're going to be cutting out of the these contents. So we need to say mask to bounds for this rounding of the corners to happen. And so now you can see that the corner radius grows and grows and grows. We can put this easily into a circle as well if we increase this one, and so forth. Okay.
Marin, just wanted to let you know that we're 26 minutes in at this point.
Okay, so another 5 and we wrap up. Okay, so this will be everything about the beginner animations, and we're going to move straight into the intermediate animations. And I'm going to jump over this topic here so that I can do a little bit of auto layout, because this is really what probably is on everyone's mind. And so don't really have so much time. I'm going to do the auto layouts, and preferably the last one as well. So let's have a look. With auto layout, you know that you position views on a screen by constraints. So basically, all the animations that you're used to from UIKit, like fade in, fade out, or tinting the background color and so forth, you do them the same way. But the trick is that you cannot really animate the frame yourself or the center property yourselves, because those are managed by auto layout. You create constraints, and then auto layout takes care to translate those constraints into what kind of frame this view needs to have, and then it sets this frame for you. And you know, like, constraints sometimes look like this, so it's not really that easy to manage them, right? So let's have a look at what can we do with this. I'm going to just quickly create a new project in here, and I'm going to call it Auto Layout Demo, just for you guys. And I'm gonna save it in here. That's okay. So with auto layout, you have this square view controller in here, just to not be bound to any particular screen size. I'm gonna put in here a label. I'll call it Animations Rock. Sorry, there it is. I'll make it a little bit bigger, like that. I'll position it here. I'm going to create a few constraints for it. So I'm going to put a I'm going to pin the width and height. This label. Okay. And then I'm going to align it horizontally, so it's always in the center horizontally. I'm going to pin this space here to the top of the screen. Pin top space to super view. Okay, now it all resolves. And as my final config step, I'm going to create a IV outlet, which will be called con, and it's going to be of type NS layout constraint. So here's the trick when you want to do this. Sorry, this is outside of the class. Okay. So this is a trick when you wanna do animations with auto layout. You need to grab a constraint and then change its value, and then let auto layout animate this change that you're doing. I'm just gonna quickly just do it here so that you can see what the result is, and it will be immediately obvious. So in view did appear, add some code. Here, so this Up here, I'm going to connect to one of my constraints that I want to animate. For this to be a really quick demo, I'm just going to move the text a little bit down. So what I need is this outlet here, this constraint here. Hope you guys see that is the one that pins the text to the top of the screen. So with this selected, it's right now selected, so I can see the constraint details in here. I'm going to switch here to the connection inspector, and I'm going to drag from the referencing outlets handle of some sort to my view controller. And it's going to ask me, do you want to connect the con outlet? Say yes. And now what I did was I created this outlet in here that I can now access from code to my constraint that is actually designed in Interface Builder. Pretty handy. I hope that you're surprised and feel like something great is going on. So what I want to do in here is basically I can just access the constraint, and I can say, for example, that a constant, which is now, I can check what is my constant right now. Again, select the label, select the constraint, inspector. So the constant is 111 points from the top. So if I run the project right now without doing anything else, the label should appear towards the top of the screen like so. And what I'm going to do here is change the constant in my view to appear method to, I don't know, 500 probably. So see that immediately the label appears here. So as I adjust the constraint, then the outer layout just rebuilds the layout and shows this label in a different spot. So the only thing that you need to do to animate this change is to call UI view animate with duration and then choose your favorite animate with duration method. I'm just going to use this one. I'm going to say 1 second duration, maybe a quarter of a second delay. No options in here. We just want to see something happening on screen. And move this inside of the animation block. Of course, I need to say self-con here. If I run now, actually nothing will change because changing the constraint from within the animation block is not enough. The extra magical step that I need to do is call layout if needed on my view, or on the parent of the label, which is my view. So I'm just going to straight type self view layout if needed. And this is the magic. This is when you run this, then this creates the animation for you. So now you can do pretty much whatever you want. If you say repeat and auto reverse here, then you can to have this go back and forth. So just as you're used to do. So this is pretty cool. And I have a last 3 minutes just because I prepared this for this demo. So auto layout, this is all it takes. And of course, you have more options, but I don't really have the time to do this in the demo. Let me just open this final demo file for the last cool thing I have in mind. Okay, I have this little app that just shows a photo of my colleague Brian. It's pretty cool. And what I want to do in here is, there it is. There are my notes. So, with iOS 7 and iOS 8, you have a lot of new APIs that you may not be making use of fully. So, for example, here I will add quickly a blur effect. So, I'm going to be really fast with this, and you are welcome to have a look at the code later on. So, I'm going to create a blur effect, and then I'm going to create a blur view. UI visual effect view. Okay, this will help me build a blur effect, which I'm going to add in my viewDidLoad method. So I'm going to say blur effect equals new UI blur effect with a dark style. Okay. This will create a blur effect, and now I'm going to also create the view that actually makes the actual blur on screen. UI visual effect view, yes, and the effect of this view is going to be the blur effect. And I also want this view to be as big as my view controller's view. So I'm just going to use this code here. And now I'm going to, of course, add the blur view to my view. So view, add subview, blur view. This will create a blur, something that, so, you remember the photo I had in there. If I just command this, you can see the photo in there. Here's Brian. When I create this blur view on top of him, and you see just the blur of him. The blur is really good for creating depth, and depth is very important in iOS 7 and iOS 8 design. So this is not really animation, right? So the blur is there, but you can be creative and do animations with the blur. So for example, you can animate the blur view. It's a view, so you can animate its alpha and make the blur happen gradually. So for example, when I have in mind is blur view alpha equals 0, 0. This will hide the blur, so not only the photo will be fully visible. And what I want to do quickly is UI view animate with duration. I use the simplest one over 2 seconds, and animation itself will say blur view alpha equals 1. So we're going to just animate the going to fade in the blur over the photo. So the effect will be that the photo will gradually blur to reach this effect. And there's a warning in the console. You can have a look later on yourself how to fix this. It's really easy. You just need an extra view in there. That's it. So this is everything I've prepared. Actually, I had a little bit more, but I think it's better if we open it for Q&A. Let me take care of this right now. Okay, so with this, I think I'm going to hand it in back to Ray and see if there's any questions already flowing in our live stream. Ray?
Yeah, thank you, Marin. That was a whirlwind tour of animations. There's so much to it. You can't cover everything, but I think you did a good job covering the basics and a little bit of the more advanced stuff you can do too. So I just want to remind everybody who's watching this live that you can submit your questions. You might have to click a little box up toward the top, if I recall, to bring open the Q&A tool. But go ahead, and if you have any questions for Marin on anything related to animations, now's your chance. He's right here waiting for your questions. We also have some questions that we had for Marin as well. So one question I'm going to ask on behalf of the audience, because I know this is a very common question for everybody. So Marin, today you showed us two different ways of performing some basic animations. One was you created the animation with UI view based animation, and then you dropped down to a lower level for CA layer animation. And a lot of people ask, when do you use which, basically, and what are you did mention that you can do more stuff with the CA layer thing, and you did show us the corner radius thing, but what other sort of cool stuff can you do with CA layer, and why would you want to dive down to that level?
So this is probably the eternal question in iOS animations. When to use UIKit, when to use core animation, what is the one good for, what is the other one good for? So first of all, UIKit animates, works with views, right? And core animation works with layers. So those are, even though similar, not really the same, right? Because UI view is where you get your user interaction running, or your gesture recognizers, and the views is where your auto layout is happening. So if you want to do anything with auto layout, if you want to do anything with user interaction, or anything else that is specific to the UIKit framework, then you need to kind of work with the UIKit animation methods. And core animation gives you access to layers. And there's a really nice set of not specified, but specialized layers that gives you the power of really specific animations. For example, there's a gradient layer, which just basically draws a gradient on screen. But the thing is that you can animate this gradient. You can change its positions and styles and the colors in there, so you can create really great animation effects for this. And there's also stroke layers, which allow you to, like draw things progressively on the screen with this. So my advice is always choose UIKit anytime this is enough for you. So, or if you need specifically UI views, then sure. If you are not sure, but you can still do it with the UIKit APIs, just go for this. It is not less performant, but it's much easier to write and then debug. And for any other task, just go down to core animation.
Yeah, I think that explains it well. And going along with what you said, I think to me some of those sort of subclasses of CA layer that you talked about, we actually had another tech talk that talked about that as well. I think those are some of the coolest effects that you can make with those things. Like you mentioned specifically gradient layer and shape layer. And I was wondering for the audience who might not know how those can be applied, if you could pull out any examples of animations that you might have seen in apps or even iOS apps that might use some of these sublayers of CA layer for different techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. This one animation that absolutely every person that has an iPhone has seen is the usage of a little circle for a progress bar. This is of course drawn with a shape layer. Just the shape is a circle, and you can draw it progressively, so it's perfect for doing any style of progress bars. And just for the gradient layer, not to leave it aside, as this effect that you see when your phone screen is locked, that used to be done with a gradient layer. Not anymore, because now it's like very they changed when they changed the iOS design. They also changed this effect, but that used to be a gradient layer animation. Anything else doesn't really can't really give any example top of my head.
Okay, that's great. I'm actually going to bring up a different question now from Datin Farsia, and he's asking if there's any promotion for iOS animation for SwiftBook, and I guess you're asking if there's any discount for the iOS animation for SwiftBook, and actually it is on. It just came out on Monday, and it is on discount right now. It's actually $10 off, and you actually can get more off if you buy some of the bundles, if I recall. But anyway, that's going on now to the end of. We're running a promotion on our site called the Swift Spring Fling, so that discount will go on till the end of the Swift Spring Fling. And while we're on this question, I guess some people might wonder, Marin, what else is covered in your book beyond what you talked about today? Because there is so much to animation. Can you give us a quick tour of all the different types of animations that you cover in the book?
Yes, thank you for asking me this. I'm going to try to be quick. Well, the book really covers view animations in detail. I would dare say probably all of the APIs in UIKit are covered. So anything you can do with views. And then there's a separate section for auto layout. So there's a crash course on auto layout, so everybody's on the same page on how it works. And there's a chapter where you learn how to animate constraints in a number of different ways. Because I just showed you one in this Hangout, but there's like many different ones. So it goes in detail about this. There's layers covered, basically many different types of basic layer animations, and then after this is done, we move into specialized layers like stroke animations, shape animations, and so on. And then we go even further by looking into frame animations for images, so like games, and also particle effects, which is one of my favorite topics. So there's a chapter about creating snow, rain, and so forth and so forth. And then we go into orientation changes, presentation controller animations, and then in the end we even have a bonus section that covers Facebook's pop. So there's a lot of animations to learn from the book.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And by the way, for everyone who hasn't seen it, this is what the print version looks like. So, all right. Actually, Evan, who's one of the tutorial team members on our site, one of the youngest, maybe the youngest member on our site, actually has a question for you too, and he's right here. So, Evan.
Thanks, Ray. Marin, there are the pop framework that does animations does not require submitting a duration for your animation, while there are libraries like the UIKit animations that require duration. Is there a significant difference between these two styles of animation?
Thank you for asking me this, Evan. I don't think that I think this is the very first time that anybody has asked me this. Not only pop does not want one duration, also the animations that you will create with by using UIKit Dynamics. So this framework in UIKit that allows you to create physics simulated animations. So this also doesn't need a duration for many of the animations that you can create with it. And of course, there's a reason, and it's the reason is simple. It's just that in UIKit, for example, you need to move a button from one location to the other. So there's nothing that could hint UIKit as to what kind of duration do you want there. So you really need to be explicit about saying I want 1 second off duration, and that's it. And in the case of pop animations, you probably talk about the decay animation, where you will swipe something with your finger on a screen, and then something will fly until it just settles on a location on screen. Or with UIKit Dynamics, you don't provide duration because things will just fall from somewhere under the gravity pull until they settle down on the ground or something like that. And this animation have different, like different input. For example, the pop one, you provide velocity for it and a deceleration rate. So then the library just calculates, the duration of the animation based on these. And the UIKit Dynamics also calculates the duration for your animation based on other things like the gravity and the mass of the objects that you have. So it's not really like a different style. It's just that the input is different. Because they're like more interactive animations, that duration is not really something that you want to set. There's different input to those. But that's a really great question because it really makes difference, right? Like when you don't know when the animation will be over, then you really have to observe when it's over and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's perfect and actually a good introduction to pop as well. We're going to move over to some questions on auto layout because 2 questions that came in that are a little bit related, so we're going to ask them one after another. The first is by Michael Mellinger, and he says, how do you get, so in the demo, remember you showed us how to connect constraints that you make in Interface Builder to properties on your view controller. But he's asking, how do you get an auto layout reference if you use the visual format language? And he has a particular simple example of the visual format language here.
Well, yeah. Of course, you cannot make outlets to all of your constraints because sometimes that's just not an option. Because probably you'll have objects that you create, yourself, either using the visual format language or just creating constraints one by one, but still, if you create it dynamically, you cannot really make an outlet to them. And that's why I said that there were more ways to animate constraints, and there were more things covered in the book, because then you will just have to inspect the layout yourself and say, okay, I want to animate, this button or this image, doesn't matter, and you will have to look into all constraints that are affecting this image and find the one that you want to work with. So if you know that the constraint is between the image and this other button, and it's about the vertical position to the super view, then you will have to loop over all constraints and find the one that you want to work with, and then you can work as I showed you with the outlet.
Yeah, so to go along with it, basically, if you're creating the constraints one by one, it's easy, right? Because the long way, not the visual format language. You create a constraint, you get it, and then you can do whatever you want with it, just like you would an outlet. It's a little trickier when using the visual format language, just because you're actually creating an array of constraints. So like Marin said, you gotta write some extra code to dig in there and find the one you actually want to modify, which is at that point, I would say, enough trouble that why don't you just create them one by one, and to me that would be easier that way. But there's two different ways to do it.
You could loop through the visual format though. Like Marin suggested, looping through every constraint after them. But once you create the array from the visual format, the example that included, I think you would just get two. So you could just loop through those two and find whichever one, left or right, that you
Yeah.
wanted.
But that's still a bit of a pain compared to
Yeah.
possibly creating them separately.
Yeah,
We never said auto layout wasn't pain. I'm sorry.
I would even suggest using maybe a third-party library like cartography or Snap, because you can add constraints all at once to one object, and then you can capture them as you add them, and it makes it really easier in that way. But I find it much easier than visual format language myself.
Great.
Yeah. I said there's three or four different ways. I think I'm going to say 3 different ways that you animate constraints in the book, and it's really it's a long chapter. I think it's really worth reading through.
Okay, thank you. That was actually an interesting discussion. And moving on, this is a related question, still on the auto layout topic. So it's from Ralph Marshall, and he's giving an example of, imagine you have a thumbnail image, and when you click on that thumbnail, animates into a full screen image. How would you do that? How would you animate that if you wanted to use auto layout?
Wait a second. I'm trying to pinpoint the problem here.
So imagine there's a small thumbnail
Yeah.
image somewhere, like maybe in a table view or in the top of a card describing something, and you want to tap that and have the image expand to fill the whole screen.
Well, that would be actually much easier in auto layout than without auto layout, because in auto layout I will just loop over all the constraints that are over the top, bottom, leading and trailing constraints, and just set them to 0, and that would actually just bring all the edges of the image to the edges of the screen, because the constraints will be 0, right? So, and then you just need to handle the stretching yourself. I'll probably just set the aspect fill for the image so that you always see it, and that's all.
To go along with that, what if that thumbnail, what if its leading constraint wasn't to the main view itself, but some other view, some super view? Can you also remove constraints and add new constraints and get auto layout to animate that instead of just modifying a constraint?
Yep. Actually, there's a funny thing about it is we have a nice comic in the book about it. The only property that you can actually modify in a constraint is the constant property. Basically, the constant is a variable, and all other variables are constant. So, so to answer your question, yes, if a constraint doesn't really work for you for the end state of your animation, you just delete it and then add a new one of whatever you want it to whatever you want it as you want it, and then the auto layout will take care to animate between the initial state and the end state for you. But if you are already having a thumbnail in a table list view or in a collection view and so forth, I would recommend basically for this use case to look into presentation transition with view controllers, because then you will have a new view controller where you can have your full screen layout laid out as you want it.
Yeah, could you go into that a little bit more, how you do that example with presentation controllers, because I think that's an interesting exercise as well.
Well, I'm trying to think how to compress a 1-hour presentation at WWDC into a 2-minute answer on a Hangout. Basically, you have one view controller and another view controller, right? And you push maybe the new view controller into the navigation stack, or maybe you present it modally, and everybody knows how to do that, right? But you can actually use the presentation protocol to basically say to UIKit, tell UIKit, I don't want the default animation and the default behavior. I want to create the animation of putting the one view controller over the old one myself. And then you can just create an animation that has your thumbnail and then all the growing and so forth, and then that will turn basically into your other view controller where you can have extra controls or localization, all you can have in a separate view controller. So that's pretty good, but it's like it's like a very complicated thing to explain in an answer.
But if I understand right, the way I think of presentation controllers is you have your first view controller, which is like maybe your table view, and there's all these thumbnails in it. And then you have your destination view controller, which is maybe the full screen image. And the presentation controller animation protocol lets you sort of have a blank canvas where you make a copy of that image view, put it on the canvas, the thumbnail where it starts, and then you make an animation to make it stretch to where it is in the destination, and then that's kind of a temporary scratch pad for that animation that you then get rid of, which makes it really easy to make those types of transitions. Is that described correctly?
Yeah, that's pretty much more or less how it works. Basically, the default animation that for mobile presentations just to like cover from the bottom to the up. This is the default one, and then you can jump in, and your animation controller can replace this default animation with anything you want. So if there's an image like zooming in, then there's a very good opportunity to create your custom animation and have the full screen image in a separate view controller.
Okay, great. All right, we have time for one last question, and we're going to answer one from Yurli Pavlishak. And the question is, what is the usual workflow for collaboration with designers? In other words, a designer created some crazy view animation in some graphic tool. How do they pass that information on to the developer who's going to implement it?
This has always been a problem for me. I think this is really difficult, especially for animations. It's a very tough task. What I would usually do is have the designers produce videos for me, and then we will discuss them together, and basically educating them about how your code can create animations is a very good idea, because this actually paid out best for me. Just introducing them to what kind of curves do we have in core animation, like what kind of interactivity there can be, what kind of gestures there are. So like they can use their own design softwares to try to create those in a way that you can then reuse yourself. But there are also many software tools that help you do this. For example, you can use what's called the app code to create. Basically, your designers can use it. It's a vector design program they can create all kind of shapes.
You mean paint code, right?
Did I say app code? Sorry. Paint code. That's what I meant. Sorry for this. This is called paint code. This is really useful because designers can use their own design language, design interfaces, and they create basically shapes, all kind of like graphical setups for you, and then you will get the code straight from the program, and then you can animate this objects that they created for you very, very easily. And actually, I don't want to endorse them just yet, but a couple of days ago, the same day, we released iOS Animation by Tutorials, another software release called Core Animator. And I've just seen the videos. It looks really interesting. It's on my to-do list to just give it a try as soon as I can. Just really didn't have any time to do that yet. But this is really interesting. Ray, have you seen it?
I've seen the videos for Core Animator too. For people who haven't seen it, it basically looks like a kind of visual editor to design animations, and I think it actually writes core animation code too in a similar way to how Paint code generates core graphics code. So it's worth looking at if you're working with the designer team, but I too haven't played with it too much yet, just watched the videos and stuff. Another tool I do want to point out is Quartz Composer you can use to prototype animations, designers can, and there's actually a plugin for it called Origami, which is made by the people behind Facebook Pop. So you can actually prototype animations that you can make with Facebook Pop in Quartz Composer using Origami, and you can actually use the same values that you would use when you're coding with Facebook Pop, and then your designers can tell you the exact settings that they've configured their animations for in Pop, which is very nice for you as a developer. So that's another one to look into, especially if you're using Facebook Pop. All right, so that is all the time we have for today, so we're going to have to wrap it up here. But before we go, I just wanted to say, Marin, thanks so much for putting together this amazing Tech Talk.
Thank you, Ray, for inviting me. That was really fun.
And I see Tim's here holding up the book. Yeah, of course, don't forget that Marin's book is out this week, so if you're interested, check it out on the site. And I just wanted to say to everyone listening, don't forget we have these Tech Talks every month, and we haven't announced the March Tech Talk yet, but we will shortly, and it'll be up on the sidebar of the site just like usual. And we'll also be sending reminders via Twitter and so on to sign up. And there's one last thing I do want to call out. If anybody is in London or wants to take a trip to London and wants to learn about Swift, there's actually a conference coming up for you guys you might be interested in. It's called the Swift Summit. So if you're interested in that, check it out at swiftsummit.com. So that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed Marin's iOS Animation Tech Talk, and we'll see you next time. Bye.